Thanks everybody for coming today. So, I guess for some reason I thought that this would be slightly easier than it's turning out to be. And I guess I thought that because Bruno lived far away and wasn't embroiled in the details of our day-to-day lives, that we wouldn't feel his absence as much. But I'm learning that absence is relative, and the details where love and affection reside are different for everyone. Though Bruno was distant, he was a daily, consistent and reliable part of our lives, and only a phone call away. Not many of you in this room knew Bruno because he lived in Maryland, so I'd like to share a bit about him. Bruno grew up in Ziguinchor, Senegal, which is located in the southern part of Senegal. He apparently led quite a mischievous childhood. His mother used to speak of his fighting and general unruliness, and lots of people remembered him as a combative kid. His nickname was Foot Foot. I don't know that I was ever entirely clear on what that meant, but his closest friends and family referred to him affectionately as Foot Foot into adulthood. He enjoyed soccer, dancing, and was apparently a pretty great boxer. I met Bruno when I was a third-year Peace Corps volunteer who had just moved to Ziguinchor to reopen it to a Peace Corps presence. I'd been introduced to his family by a staff member at the Peace Corps office. So this was the family that would help me to get to know Ziguinchor by telling me who to talk to, teaching me about the local culture, and giving me tips on how to get around. I ended up living right around the corner, and so I spent a great deal of time at their house. The first time I saw Bruno, he had his back to me. And was washing his hands after a long hot day working on the roof of his family home. He was wearing purple jogging pants. He turned and walked toward me, smiling, and my crush was born. As you will hear from those who knew him, Bruno had the most kind, friendly, sweet smile you can imagine. It was a smile that told you were instantly accepted, instantly liked, instantly interesting. You knew this was a guy you could count on to be good to you. Bruno was the consummate gentleman. Though I lived right around the corner and never felt like Ziguinchor was a dangerous place, he walked me home every evening from dinner at their house. We chatted as we walked, and I remember being impressed by how polite he was. One night when I had some volunteer guests, we all went out dancing, and on the way home, he surprised me with a kiss, and that was it. Fast forward, we ended up getting married a year after I left Peace Corps on July 26, 1997. And as soon as he could get his paperwork in order, he came to the U.S. Slippery Rock, Pennsylvania was the first place he landed, where I was studying to get my master's degree. Despite the language barrier, he immediately established several deep and lasting friendships with other students in the program, some of whom you'll hear from today. They wrote down their memories. Bruno and I eventually moved to DC and found jobs. He initially volunteered his time at the National Zoo and then got a job at the Wardman Park Marriott, where he worked up until just a couple of months ago. Bruno really loved and respected that job. I think it gave him what he could never ever have back in Senegal with the work he was doing there, and that was a sense of being valued, being respected, of having the opportunity to demonstrate his capability to become really good and knowledgeable about something. That job was incredibly important to him, and he was adored by his coworkers. As a daddy, he challenged some of the stereotypes of African men. I don't think this was always easy for him. For example, the idea of being in the birthing room was not one he initially relished, but he went along unwillingly at first and was amazing. For any of you who have been there, giving birth is not a pretty and gentle process. It must have freaked him out completely, but he was there and engaged the entire time. He didn't faint or turn away. He was a steady presence and was there for the deliveries of both Elijah and Grace. He was a wonderful daddy and took Elijah and Grace to the park every morning, bringing them treats from the hotel, and he loved them deeply. Bruno hasn't been a daily physical presence in our lives since 2007, but he was constantly there. The kids spoke to him 2 to 3 times a week, and I called him regularly in the middle of the day to discuss the kids, or in recent months to talk about how he was feeling. He was a close friend and occupied a unique niche in our lives, a niche which remains but is fundamentally and irreversibly changed. I'm not quite sure how to deal with that yet. I think the 3 of us will find our way as we go. And we're so grateful for the love and support shown to us by our friends and family. I'm hoping to be able to take the kids to Senegal next year to visit family and to visit the cemetery where Bruno was buried close to his father and mother. I've said before that the 3 most transformative events in my life have been Peace Corps, marriage, and motherhood. Bruno was a part of all 3 of those things. He taught me an enormous amount about myself and about being human. He gave me the 2 people I treasure most. I am so, so grateful that he was a part of my life, and it will be so hard to really accept that he won't be around anymore. But he leaves a legacy of kindness, humility, and gentleness to his children. Grace and Elijah, we will make sure that he continues to inspire us, and I promise to you, Grace and Elijah, that we will continue to honor and live that legacy as your daddy would have wanted. Gracie, are you ready? You look great.
The thing that I remember about my dad is when I was a little baby, I made up jokes, but they weren't the best jokes. He would always laugh just to make me happy. When I think about him, I always think about that I will never be able to hear his voice, which really makes me sad. Also, when I think about him, I can't believe he's actually gone. When I go in my room, one of the first things I see is a picture of him because I have 6 pictures of him in my room. I have... To me, he was the best dad in the world. I am going to miss him so much. So much. I'd like to say thank you to my dad for everything. Also, everyone who came. This is very important to me. This is very important to me, and to all my friends that are here for coming. You guys are awesome.
Come on.
Okay, well, first of all, I would like to thank everybody who came here today because, as Grace said, this is very important to us. So, I just wanted to say what I remembered about my dad. Well, every time I went to DC, he would, always take us places and stuff, like the hotel or the zoo. Did he ever take us to that park?
Which park?
The park that he would take us every morning?
No, not when you were older.
Oh, he didn't take us to the park, but he would always give us a great time. And I would just like to thank him a lot for that. So, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to read something that my mom sent. And then Judy will read some things. Okay. So my mom asks, how do you describe a man who shared in the creation of my beautiful grandchildren, Elijah and Grace? He seemed to always have a warm and inviting smile. The first photo I saw of him was with his arm around Steph and that smile. I was honored to be at the birth of those very special grandkids. Bruno was there and a little shy about the whole process. This was not done in his Africa, but what a proud father he was. He loved those darling children of his. I am also reminded of how he cleaned up, planted, and cared for the garden in his home in Maryland. He was proud to be a homeowner. Fritz, his father-in-law, commented on the house after seeing and having it described to him as a fixer-upper that he really thought it was a burner-downer. but how wrong he was. Both Stephanie, you saw our house in DC, but how wrong he was. Both Stephanie and Bruno worked to make it a home to be proud of, one in which Eli and Gracie began their lives. The marriage between Bruno and Stephanie did not survive, but their love and respect for one another did. Bruno was always a friend. They co-parented as they should have, with the well-being of Eli and Grace as their prime importance. He always called me Mom, an honor I loved. Both Fritz and I admired Bruno. He was always concerned about how we were doing. I have to admit that I mostly spoke with him on the phone, as Fritz had trouble understanding him. But when we were together, that barrier dropped, and Bruno and Fritz had some memorable conversations. I miss Bruno. I know Bruno will not really be gone, as he lives on in the hearts and smiles and minds of Elijah and Grace. He will always be with us as these two children grow up and do important things in their lifetime. Thank you, Bruno. I hope you are at peace with no pain and with the knowledge that you left a legacy of love. I will always be filled with fond memories of you, Mom. Okay, Judy. Judy's going to read. These are accounts from two friends.
Okay, so the first one is from Chris McHenry Glenn. Every now and then, life hands you a really special gift. That's how I feel about meeting Bruno and working with him on an organic farm during the summer of 1998. You have to go sit down.
Okay.
I'm feeling
Sorry.
Bruno had come to Slippery Rock, Pennsylvania just a few months prior and was looking for summer work. It just so happened that my now husband and I were going to be working on an organic farm, and the farmer was looking for more help. We thought it would be a great experience to get to know Bruno and to work with him. That summer we rode to work together, ate lunches together, and worked long days in the fields together. I have many fond memories of that experience, which I hold close to my heart. One of the first things that I immediately noticed about Bruno was his quick, gentle, friendly smile. It was a smile that said, "You are welcome as my friend." It was a smile that invited conversation and laughter, both of which was shared a lot over the summer months. The conversations were particularly meaningful because Bruno's willingness to communicate with us despite our language barrier. He had just arrived to the U.S. and was still learning the language. We had the most interesting conversations, animated conversations about his home and life in Senegal, using more than just words to be understood. Bruno loved sharing information about his home country and daily life there. I remember one evening after work, we joined him and Stephanie at their home for a Senegalese meal. I remember him walking towards us in Senegalese clothing, smiling brightly with arms wide open to welcome us to his home. Bruno just had a way of making you feel so welcome, so trusted, so part of his life. When I think back to those days, I also remember just how hard he worked. Bruno was the type of person that never showed you how hard his work was. No, he just worked methodically, evenly, efficiently, and without complaint. During that summer, our farm had a tremendous yield of green beans. 11 acres of green bean plants, some with 40 to 50 beans dangling. Hour after hour, day after day, we picked and picked and picked. Bruno paced himself every day, picking row after row. When his bushel was full, he'd hoist it up on top of his head, walk across the field with beautiful balance, stack his box onto the wagon, and get another box. It was Bruno who motivated me to work hard, to keep going, to keep up without complaint. It was his gentle smile and fun conversation that kept the hours passing, easily. I know that my life has been greatly enriched by knowing Bruno and working with him. He taught me a lot about openness, friendship, communication, and attitude. The memories I have of Bruno still speak with me today and truly are a gift in my life. He is and will be missed deeply. Chris Glenn. This one is from Leo Glenn. I was apprehensive about meeting Bruno. I'm no extrovert to begin with, and I was nervous about meeting someone who spoke little English. I was afraid I would have little in common. I was preparing myself for the stiffness of introductions, the awkward silences or false bravado, and the cautious sizing each other up that so often accompanies the first meeting of two males. And so those of you who knew him knew that I was completely unprepared to meet Bruno. He came to me with arms extended and a broad smile of pure warmth. trust and friendship, and in one instant, all of my pretensions were wiped away. He embraced me as if there were no doubt in his mind that we would become close friends, or rather that we already were, and all that was left was the rediscovery. We worked together for a time on an organic farm, and I was continually struck by the ease with which he communicated with a limited vocabulary, not only the relatively simple back and forth necessary to complete the tasks at hand, but also complex stories about the life in Senegal. I particularly remember his story of hiring a taxi to run down a goat for the family meal. We kept asking him to repeat the story, certain that he had gotten it wrong. One day I drove a very large wooden splinter into my thumbnail. It extended almost the entire length of the nail and broke off under the nail, so there was no way to pull it out. It was excruciatingly painful, my entire hand was throbbing, and I was considering my options, the main one being a trip to the emergency room. Bruno, perfectly calm with his ever-present smile, said, "I can fix that, give me your knife." He explained that a member of his family, either mother or grandmother, was the village healer, and he had learned many things from her. I did not find that fact reassuring. My mind had glazed over, and I was fixated on the part that involved me giving him a knife. My imagination raced through movie scenes of the Old West, bullet removals and Civil War field hospitals, mostly involving unsanitary conditions and a lot of blood and screaming. I politely declined his offer, but Bruno equally politely insisted, and in the end, against my better judgment, I handed him my pocket knife. He took my hand and very gently but firmly began peeling away at the edge of my thumbnail with the knife. He worked patiently and with complete assurance, peeling tiny layer after layer away until the edge of the splinter was exposed, and he could pull it out by catching it between the knife edge and his fingernail. There was no pain and no blood, and I had greatly enhanced respect for Bruno as a healer and also as a friend. Bruno was one of the most genuine, kind-hearted, generous, and least pretentious people I have ever met. His friendship made me a better person, and though I hadn't spoken with him in years, I don't want to imagine a world that doesn't have Bruno in it. And just for my part to say a few things about Bruno, because I first met Bruno, I think it was 1998 or 1999, when Stephanie and Bruno moved to Tacoma Park, Maryland, where I was already living with my husband. And they rented this crazy apartment right next to the metro station. And so as soon as the metro trains would go by, the whole house would shake. But Bruno, and here I was meeting Stephanie and her new husband from Senegal, who I hadn't met. We were in Senegal together. But here he is coming, and I thought, oh, they're going to hate this place. This is going to be miserable. And it was right above, I think, a Jamaican food kitchen, so it smelled very spicy all the time. But there was a little area to garden in the back of the apartment, so it was perfect for them, and it was great, and they were so happy, and we could come over for dinner anytime. And I have, when we're in a different space, I'll tell you all, Stephanie wants me to tell you a really funny story that involves a dirty movie, but I won't say it here because this is my church. But someday I'll tell other people. But the best part, though, really was when they moved into the crazy house. It was definitely a fixer-upper, and they turned this place that you can't imagine into a really beautiful, cool home to live in. And that's where the kids were born, and it was so interesting when I would come to visit them because Elijah and Grace, as you can imagine, were very energetic little toddlers that would just run all over the place, and Bruno, being Bruno, was the most mellow person you can imagine. And he would just sit there, and they would run across him, and then they would run across the other way, and he would just smile and laugh, and he would start to try to slow him down, okay, go ahead. So he was really a wonderful father, and very loving and affectionate and giving with the kids, and so that's what I'll always remember of Bruno.
Now I've just got 2 more memories to share with you. One is from my friend Kathy Callahan, who I worked with at Peace Corps, Washington, D.C. Kathy says, "My greatest memory of Bruno is his smile, beaming bright, full of light and love. The joy of the whole world was in that smile, and a touch of the world's heartache, which always makes a joyful smile that much more real, that much more beautiful." I remember instantly warming to him, instantly loving him. He was so free and easy, so comfortable in his own skin. All these years later, having not seen him for years, I can still picture him right away because of that smile. Another vivid memory I have of him is when she and I were at my house in Tacoma Park. We were playing with sweet little baby Elijah, and Bruno came home. I remember how he held Elijah, cradling him with such devotion, such absolute love in his eyes. I feel blessed to have been a tiny part of his life. He has left such a legacy in Eli and Grace, such a tribute to me and to Bruno. His spirit will surround us with warmth and that loving smile always. Okay, and then my sister, Kim. I remember meeting Bruno for the first time. He came off as the most peaceful person with a calming and welcoming smile. See a trend here, the smile, if you haven't noticed. My initial judgment proved to be right when he met each of my children over the years. All three of them were very shy and scared of men as babies and toddlers, and all three went right into his arms without a peep. In fact, they all smiled and cuddled him instantly. One of my funny memories is when he was visiting us when we lived in Scottsdale, Arizona. We took him to Scottsdale Fashion Square, which was my favorite mall to shop. He carried Caitlin, who was a baby, the entire time she wouldn't let him put her down. Bruno looked at me in about an hour and said, "There's not a single black person in this entire place." Then about another hour later, he asked me if any black people lived in Arizona. The rest of his visit was his continued observation of where we were living. He'd made jokes nonstop about the ridiculous place we lived with no black people, a desert with green grass and the obvious waste of water. That trip was the one I remember the most as I got to know Bruno despite our language barrier. He was easy to make laugh and joke around with, and he was the best uncle to my kids. I remember him sitting inside the pink playhouse with Allie, having a tea party. He did whatever she asked despite not knowing English well. She loved playing with him, and apparently no shared language was needed. He communicated with his hearts to the kids, and they loved him. Some other people have sent some memories. My Auntie Eve remembers his smile and talks about the place that we built in Washington. Another friend sends a remembrance of when we lived in Ziguinchor, when we had a party and killed the pig, and he drank too many beers. But that was sort of what Peace Corps was about sometimes. Another friend, Jeffrey Mason, remembers him and going to backyard barbecues at our house in Tacoma Park. And a friend of mine who also knew Bruno at Slippery Rock remembers his love of ice cream and how he wanted to eat it every day. So those are the memories that we have today. And anybody is welcome to say anything, but otherwise, Judy is going to close with a prayer.
Okay, let's bow our heads. Dear Lord God, thank you so much for the life of Bruno, for all the people that he touched, for his warm smile that made everybody feel at home, and for all the great memories that everybody has. Thank you especially for his passion and his compassion and his love for his children. And thank you for Bruno for creating his children, because they are wonderful people and they will go out and do great things. And God, please be with us now in our sorrow, because we'll miss him, because life will be difficult, and give us the strength and help us to remember just the happy times and how wonderful he was. And please make sure that those memories just bring us joy, and know that he is in a safe place and that he's in no pain, and that he's always going to be with us in our spirits. We pray in your name. Amen.